Hello and thank you for joining us on Sideline Story, your destination for sports news, analysis and discussions. I'm Brandon Yates and today we will be discussing the 2023 Formula One season. We'll take a look at Max Verstappen and Team Red Bull's performance, preview this weekend's race and discuss a few other trending topics in the sport. I'll be chatting about these points with my two brilliant co-hosts, Zhou Guanyu and Tianyu. And Zhou Guanyu, I kind of equate Max Verstappen's dominance in the last 3 years to Manchester City's. They've won 3 titles each, and at this point we're just discussing who's the best to come in second. So at this point, the battle for the Formula One Drivers' Championship is over. Max Verstappen wins yet again, surprise, surprise. But I guess there's still a relatively tight battle for whoever's going to finish second. So who do you think could take that position?
Yeah, it looks like 3 races are now in contention for second. Sergio Perez, Lewis Hamilton and Fernando Alonso. This battle is quite intense.
Yeah.
Actually, at one stage of the season, it looked like Sergio Perez is about to secure the number 2 spot and complete a 1-2 finish for Red Bull.
I guess that was early in the season, right? Where we Max Verstappen's been
start.
dominating all year, but Perez was kind of keeping up with him and then started falling off a little bit.
Yeah, for the first 5 races, Sergio Perez made 4 podium finishes, including 2 titles actually, one in Saudi Arabia and another in Azerbaijan. And people even started to thinking about possibilities of Perez challenging his teammate Verstappen's dominance in Formula One.
And then Verstappen said, "No, thank you, sir. Back to your place. Stay in second."
Yeah, after that, there were some mixed results for Perez. 16th in Monaco, 6th in Canada, 8th in Singapore. Remember, Perez is in the fastest Formula One car he's racing. So these are some inconvincing performances. But still, the car performance has kept him high on the table. He's still in second place, 30 points ahead of Lewis Hamilton. Actually, Hamilton had the chance to shrink this gap in Qatar, where Perez only finished in 10th. But unfortunately, Hamilton collided with his own teammate, George Russell, and had to quit that race.
Can you imagine being a team boss and seeing 2 teammates colliding? That must be one of the most frustrating experiences you can possibly imagine. Look, I know that they're both battling and they're trying to do their best for themselves and for the team, but my goodness, it must be frustrating to see teammates collide. So, I mean, it does happen pretty frequently, but man, it must be frustrating. But from Max Verstappen's point of view, Zhou Guanyu, I'm sure he does like having someone in his own team that pushes him all the way, but I'm sure he also likes winning titles and not having too much competition. So do you think that he feels indifferent about Perez's performance this season, or do you think he wants Perez to really push him all the way?
I think Perez really helped him a lot in terms of being a wingman. And the Verstappen just go all the way for his own approach.
Yeah, and for his own personal glory.
For the race, yes. Yeah. It seems to me that every season Verstappen has added a new skills, a new set of...
a new dimension.
Yeah, a new dimension.
Some new elements that makes him even more dominant than he has always been.
To his arsenal, every season. So this season he's completely different from last season, where he also dominated.
What do you think has been different about him this season?
I think his approach to every race is different now.
So he's more methodical about each race as opposed to just going all out and trying to be the fastest guy.
Yeah, he concentrated on the strategy every race and stick to the strategy. For the first championship season, I think Verstappen was like, I don't care about what the team principal told me, but I will go my way.
He seemed very defiant.
Yeah.
And a bit petulant, I guess. Like, I suppose he was a youngster and just making his way in the sport, and he was brash and clearly an amazing talent, but there was definitely some fine-tuning that needed to be done, and it seems like he's managed to achieve that
But still,
now.
the raw speed is still there.
Yeah, exactly. That's the thing. Like, at the end of the day, I mean, tactics do come into it, and you need to keep a level head and try and do what your team wants you to do. But when it comes down to it, speed is everything, right? And he's never lacked speed.
But returning to the topic of the battle for number 2.
We went a bit off course there.
Yeah, at this stage, I think what matters the most in this battle is who makes less mistakes.
Yes.
And Hamilton, to me, is a more consistent driver.
Yeah.
So even
the most
though
experienced too,
yeah.
right, I suppose. Yeah, at the highest level. I mean, Fernando Alonso can also claim that he's one of the most experienced drivers in the entire grid right now. But I think Hamilton probably has more consistency in terms of his experience.
Exactly, yeah, definitely. So I think that even though he's 30 points behind Perez and he's not in a better car, but I think he still can make the comeback on the table. And to Fernando Alonso, Alonso's dropping in on the table in the second half of the season. I don't think it's about his personal capabilities. I think Red Bull's reliability, rather Aston Martin's reliability issue should be blamed here.
Yeah.
Alonso's teammate Lance Stroll hasn't won a single point since the summer break.
He's been a bit of a problem this season, right?
Yeah.
For the team, yeah.
So yeah, for a rather young constructor, how to keep the car consistently running for the entire season is still something Aston Martin should work on.
But I guess that's where they made the smart move in bringing in Fernando Alonso, because they're a new constructor, like you said, but having someone that's so experienced like Fernando Alonso in their car, I think that's going to be hugely beneficial for them and for Lance Stroll, I guess, as not necessarily in this season, but as the future progresses. And it will be interesting to see if Fernando Alonso remains with Aston Martin and how long he actually continues to perform at a high level in Formula One. Tianyu, when I think of the likes of Lewis Hamilton and Fernando Alonso battling for second position, those are two drivers that have won, Formula One titles before, drivers' titles. And, they're used to being in the spotlight and they're used to trying to compete for number one. Do you think they'll be motivated to push all of the way to potentially finish second?
I'm sorry, I'm just going to be boring. I would still go for Sergio Perez.
Yeah, but that's another thing. I mean, because he is used to being the wingman, like Zhou Guanyu said.
Yeah.
So I guess he potentially has more motivation to finish second, because I think he sees his place in the Red Bull team as being the wingman. I don't think he sees himself as ever being ahead of Max Verstappen.
Yeah.
So he might potentially have more motivation to finish second than the likes of Lewis Hamilton and Fernando Alonso, who, in my opinion, if they're not competing for the title, they probably don't really care where they finish.
Yeah, and first of all, it's like Yang Guang said, he's still 30 points ahead of the third place driver, Lewis Hamilton. That's a large gap.
Yeah. And with only three races remaining, right?
Five
Five races.
Yeah, for the rest of the season. So it will be really hard for Hamilton to overturn the gap and
to stay motivated.
Yeah.
Like, that's my thing. I mean, if someone who has won 7 titles, to be motivated to finish second, I think that would be a huge challenge for him.
I think he's really bored about the game. He doesn't want to quit.
In terms of where Hamilton and Fernando Alonso find themselves, finding motivation to try and finish as high as possible when the Formula One championship is already decided might be something difficult to find motivation for. But I guess one way that Alonso and Hamilton can see it is an opportunity to prepare for next season and fine-tune a couple of things that they have been struggling with throughout this season. Would you say that that's how Alonso and Hamilton should view the rest of this season?
I think they are fully motivated, actually.
Okay.
Yeah, because first of all, as you said, it would be a good start for next season, either in their confidence or their preparation, fine-tuning their car for next season, 2024. Secondly, I think Hamilton would grasp this opportunity to shake Red Bull's dominance. Red Bull has won the constructor title. Verstappen has won the driver's title.
And maybe try and make them think for next season, wow, Hamilton's starting to improve. He's got a lot of experience. Maybe he could be a threat in 2024.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so he can leave his mark.
Yeah, Hamilton will go all out for that second position, so that Red Bull will not think, okay, this is our field already.
Yeah.
Red Bull had to rethink about Mercedes challenge, even Ferrari, even Aston Martin next season.
Yeah.
That's what Mercedes tried to do, especially after Toto Wolff, the team principal of Mercedes, came back after surgery.
Right. And he's a huge part of that team. I mean, in terms of motivation,
strategies.
Yeah, so it's very important to have him back.
Yeah, I think Mercedes will try to grab that second position, even though to Hamilton it doesn't mean that much.
Yeah, I guess the actual position doesn't mean that much to him, but the mental side of things
Yeah,
and the
exactly.
effect that it could have in next season could potentially be very important indeed. But let's stick with that battle for second place. Tianyu, do you think that Fernando Alonso and Lewis Hamilton could push Sergio Perez?
Let's look at the statistics. Perez is the only man that's managed to steal 2 wins from his teammates Verstappen. Yeah, he's been suffering from a poor run of form in recent races, but I think he's actually turned the corner a little bit in recent.
Excuse the pun. Yeah.
Yeah.
Turn the corner.
Yeah, in the recent race, and I think he will get better in the rest of the season. And yeah, we can still see how Red Bull's car and team have been dominant in the races, and they're still proving to be a lot of notches in front of the other teams. And so yeah, if nothing goes wrong with Perez, and like Yang Guang said, don't make mistakes, and I think he's still very likely to finish runner-up.
Unlikely that he won't make any mistakes though, because also like Yang Guang said, he has messed up a lot this season, right? So do you think that he can maintain a cool head for those final 5 races?
Overall, I think he still managed to maintain a high level of consistency for the majority of the season.
So do you think he can keep that going in the final 5 races?
Yeah.
Looking at this Red Bull car, Yang Guang, it seems like if we even put like a 90-year-old grandpa in the car, they could probably still do relatively well in Formula One, because it's, like you said, it's just the fastest car in the field by a long shot. And that's partially a part of Max Verstappen's success, not to take away from the fact that he is a phenomenal driver, probably the best driver in the field right now. But having that fast car has also been a huge advantage for him and Sergio Perez for quite some time now. When Red Bull and the bosses at Red Bull look at Sergio Perez's performances and they realize that he's in a fast car, but he's still been making quite a few mistakes throughout the season, do you think that his position at Red Bull is potentially at risk?
I still think this battle for second will be the deciding factor over Red Bull's decision or thinking over Perez's future with the team. Let me put it this way. If Perez wins it, he might have his seat reserved for 2024, but the chances are still Red Bull could get rid of him, just considering, as I said, his disappointing performances midway through the season. But if he loses it, he's definitely out.
Yeah. Really?
Yeah.
Okay. So if he doesn't finish second, you reckon his time at Red Bull's over?
Yeah.
Interesting.
I do think so. Actually, after the Qatar race, where Perez finished in 10th, Red Bull team principal Christian Horner actually acknowledged that it's time to sit down with Perez.
He said that publicly?
Yeah.
Wow.
That's
harsh.
That's not something the drivers or any employees would
No,
love
not
to
at
hear.
all. Yeah, that's terrible.
After some under par performances.
I mean, it can affect a driver in one or two ways. They can either view that as, look, the boss doesn't believe in me, and it can affect their performances and make them, start driving badly, or even give up and, not make that much effort. Or it could actually motivate them to say, look, I want to prove myself. So I think it's a bold move by Horner. And it'll be interesting to see how Perez reacts to it, particularly in the last 5 races. And I'm just thinking about it from Max Verstappen's perspective. I want to be the dominance guy, right? I want to be the number 1 at Red Bull. I don't want anyone to push me for the Drivers' Championship. I still want someone to help with the Constructors' Championship, but I need to be that number 1 guy that dominates the drivers' standings. And look, I think he does want a very talented wingman in his corner, but he also wants to, make sure that he doesn't have someone in his own team that's potentially pushing him for the title. So do you think that he might have a word in Horner's ear and say, look, I know Perez isn't the best, but I want to maintain my position as number 1, and I still want someone to support me in the overall Constructors' Championship, but, I don't want to be worrying about my own teammate in terms of my dominance in the driver's standings. So do you think Verstappen might want to keep Perez, or potentially bring someone in that's even better than Perez? What are your thoughts there?
If I was in Verstappen's position, I would love to have Perez on my side.
Because you know that you're the dominant one forever. Yeah.
Simply
I would be the
because-
same.
Simply because Perez is a near perfect partner, I think, to Verstappen.
Because he's not terrible, but he's also
Yeah.
not going to push me for the Drivers' Championship. So it works perfectly. So he knows his place, and my place at number one is secure.
And whenever Perez is required to give away to Verstappen, whenever...
He happily goes, there we go, Max, go for that checkered flag. There's never any questions. Where we've seen problems at other teams in the past where there's always been kind of a battle in those conversations.
Yeah, whenever Red Bull puts priority on Verstappen in track strategy, which I think Verstappen totally deserves, Perez never complains.
Nope.
He fully...
I think he's just happy to be there.
Yeah, he cooperates fully
Yeah.
and humbly, which I think Red Bull should
really humble.
value.
Yeah.
We all know...
But it seems like they don't value it, though, because Horner said, look, I need to sit down and have a discussion about Perez. So it's a bit of a strange situation that Red Bull and Perez find themselves in, because, like you said, I think it does work really well for the team and for Max Verstappen, but then Horner comes out to the public and says, look, you know, Perez isn't necessarily doing what we want him to do.
Yeah, I think Perez, for some races, he went too far.
Yeah.
Like a 16th position.
That's unacceptable.
Red Bull.
Yeah.
But again, as you said, we all know how the intra-squad competition in Mercedes, in Ferrari has damaged both teams on the track, on their performances on the track. And that collision between Hamilton and George Russell was a nightmare.
Yeah.
It will never happen in Red Bull.
Definitely not. Or if it does, that'll be the end of Perez at Red Bull.
So from this perspective, I do think Perez is a perfect wingman to Verstappen. We all know how Perez defended Hamilton for 2 laps in the last race of 2021, which enabled Verstappen to make the final stage surpass and win that miraculous title.
Yeah.
So I think Perez...
Miraculous is one way of looking at it. I see it as criminal.
I think Perez deserves another contract just based on that performance on that specific night.
Absolutely, that's a very good point. Tianyu, do you think that Perez is the perfect wingman? Do you think that Red Bull should respect him and keep him at Red Bull?
Yeah, he's definitely under a lot of pressure now because, you know, Red Bull demands a lot of their drivers.
Yeah, but it's crazy though how much pressure there is at Red Bull to win, because they're putting so much pressure on Perez just to maintain that second place and to try and keep up with Verstappen, which is seemingly impossible. So the standard that Red Bull demands is pretty incredible, because even though, like Yang Guang said, Perez is doing an outstanding job of being Verstappen's wingman, not all the time, has made 1 or 2 mistakes, but generally he is doing an outstanding job. And I'm sure Red Bull and Horner do value Perez's performances and his role in terms of supporting Verstappen. They're still putting pressure on him and sort of threatening him whenever he does make a mistake. So at Red Bull, there just seems to be no room for error.
Yeah, but I think Perez should be worried about it because, you know, after having a really strong start in the season, he ended up scoring just 5 points at the last 3 races, and all riddled with mistakes and incidents.
So I guess what Horner has said recently is fairly valid.
Yeah.
Just as a stark comparison with the start of the season, he was only 1 point behind Verstappen, and now the gap is 209.
Massive drop-off.
Yeah. How could that be, given the car he has been?
But is that also just down to Verstappen's excellence? I mean, there's 2 ways of seeing it.
Yeah, that's true.
But it simply doesn't make sense from 1 point to 209.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
Yeah, so consistency definitely needs to be worked on there for sure.
But I do think the following 2 races in the US and Mexico would be chances for Perez to prove himself again. Especially in Mexico, he will definitely get the crowd support.
Sometimes that has an adverse effect though, because we've seen, like for example at the Asian Games, sometimes when athletes play in front of their home crowd, it can really put an extra weight on their shoulders. But does he generally do quite badly at it on his home turf?
The historical records are against him in Mexico City. He's never won in his home country.
But he's always had massive amounts of support. I think he's like probably one of the biggest sporting idols in Mexico. I've been to Mexico, and I just remember seeing pictures of Perez everywhere. Yeah, so he's a very widely celebrated figure in Mexico.
But his best finish, best result in Mexico City was a third place finish.
So I guess this should be seen as a motivating factor for him to try and finish in second, maintain his place at Red Bull, potentially get his first win in Mexico. So I guess there's a lot of things that Perez is still playing for, maybe even more than the likes of Alonso and Hamilton. So I think the next couple of races should be very interesting. But I think at this point we can establish that Perez potentially has more motivation than the likes of Hamilton and Alonso. But going into this weekend's race, I believe we're moving to the Circuit of the Americas.
Yeah.
Tianyu, who do you think are potentially the favorites to go on and dominate this race, besides Verstappen, I suppose?
Yeah, it goes without saying that Verstappen remains to be the biggest favorite.
Yeah.
But I mean, even though he and Red Bull have already claimed the drivers and constructors title, they will still want more. And I think Verstappen is motivated to pick up his record-equaling 15th win of the season. But apart from Verstappen, I think notably we can see the two drivers with McLaren, Piastri and Norris, are doing incredibly well in recent races. With the upgrades in their cars and their good form, I think both of them are able to achieve some good results if they can maintain the momentum. And I also think the fierce competition between the two inside the team can also provide a boost to their performance. So a McLaren can be a potential favorite in the upcoming race.
Yeah, and I guess when teams and drivers have nothing to lose, that also makes them a threat, right? Because they're going to go out there and not be concerned about standings and just try and do their best. So I guess that's something that Verstappen in particular and potentially Perez need to be aware of.
And also for Lewis Hamilton, the track at Austin has been one of his favorites. He's won titles in the U.S. Grand Prix, and the weekend in Qatar was really a bad one for him. You know, he will definitely be looking to bounce back. And the beautiful thing about Lewis Hamilton throughout his career has been his ability to bounce back stronger than ever after a bad weekend. So maybe there's something to expect from him at next weekend's race.
Yeah. Yang Guang, from your side, who do you think could potentially challenge Verstappen going into the Formula One race this weekend?
Yeah, I think Verstappen is highly likely to continue his dominance.
Highly likely is a nice way to put it, yeah.
Even though he has secured the world title, I think he will be very relaxed on the track this weekend, which I think makes him even more unreachable.
Yeah.
And again, that battle for second between Sergio Perez and Lewis Hamilton would make two drivers try to win as many points as possible. So those two are also title contenders in the US. I don't know if Red Bull will prioritize Perez this time in Austin.
That could be interesting, right?
Yeah.
Considering that Verstappen already has the title wrapped up.
That could swing the results in the US. I think even though the championship for the constructors' title and the drivers' title are set, this competition in the US will be very intense.
Yang Guang, bringing things to China, there's been a lot of excitement in terms of, Zhou Guanyu re-signing with Alfa Romeo, and Formula One is now returning to Shanghai, which I think is fantastic for Chinese fans. But let's start with Zhou Guanyu. Do you think that he will improve now that he signed his new deal with Alfa Romeo and, keeping things, with Formula One in China? Do you also think that Chinese fans are going to be very excited about Formula One returning to Shanghai?
It's a really good news, first of all, for Zhou Guanyu himself, but also for all the Chinese fans in this sport, to see Zhou Guanyu signing a new deal with Alfa Romeo. I mean, we all know how hard it is to earn a seat in Formula One. The lineup of 20 drivers represent arguably the best 20 drivers in the world. Zhou Guanyu has earned 6 points so far this season with 3 ninth-place finishes. 6 points equaled his total from last season in 2022. So I think we can expect some progress from Zhou Guanyu. Considering
there's been steady progress, right?
Yeah.
And also considering some of the things that he's had to deal with mentally, like example, that terrible crash that he had, I think it was a few months ago. Was it last year?
At the Silverstone last year.
Yes, yeah.
Considering there are still 5 races to go, we can see some improvement from Zhou Guanyu as well. I think Zhou Guanyu's contract extension with Alfa Romeo, the team's decision, is partially based on Zhou Guanyu, based on economic reasons, considering the huge market behind Zhou Guanyu in China. But I think more importantly, the deal is based on Zhou Guanyu's own efforts and his hard work.
And potential.
Yeah. He's only 24 years old. Alfa Romeo said Zhou Guanyu's maturity and his methodical approach in the second year in Formula One earned him many supporters within the team, and the deal is a natural conclusion.
Yeah.
Actually, Zhou Guanyu's teammates, Valtteri Bottas,
A very experienced driver.
he said there's a great atmosphere inside Alfa Romeo. And
That's good to hear.
yeah, and he gets along with Zhou Guanyu really well, and they push each other hard to improve. I think these are really good compliments about Zhou Guanyu. It seems to me that he has earned this reputation and, more importantly, trust within the team based on his attitude and hard work. And this could be the foundation for him to improve even further next year in 2024.
And then in terms of Formula One returning to Shanghai, do you think that Chinese fans should be very excited about that?
Absolutely. It's not only the first race in China in 4 years after the pandemic disruption, but also the first race in China where a home driver will compete.
Yes, of course.
Yeah,
I think the fanfare is going to be incredible. I think there's going to be a huge turnout from Chinese fans. I can't wait to see that next season. Yeah, it's going to be incredible. And then, Tianyu, from your side, Zhou Guanyu, do you think him re-signing with Alfa Romeo is a good deal? From what Yang Guang said, it seems like there's a good atmosphere in the team right now.
Yeah, I would be really happy for Zhou Guanyu to see him playing in his home court in Shanghai next year, but I think he definitely deserves a better car and a better team. I think he's been doing a great job.
It's so early on in his career, though. Don't you think he is with a good team at Alfa Romeo?
You know, Bottas is better paid with a better car, and
well, he's more experienced.
Yeah, with a lot more care in the team, but he's only earned 4 points more than Zhou Guanyu did this season. And honestly, I think Zhou is much more than what he can achieve now. Since the start of the season, he's been troubled by mechanical failures of his car, and yet Alfa Romeo has never really solved his problem.
Yeah.
And yet he still gained some points with limited condition. So I hope he can achieve some good results in the remaining races of the season, and maybe end up taking over Bottas in terms of the total points gained, and for more spotlight and possible future chances to work for better teams.
Yeah, so I think for the remainder of the season, there's still a lot of excitement in terms of that battle for second place. And then going into next season, you know, the return of Formula One to Shanghai should be very, very exciting. Zhou Guanyu's progression, that's also something to watch. And we'll also have to see if anybody can compete with the great Max Verstappen and Team Red Bull. And we'll also have to see if Sergio Perez manages to keep his place in that team. But that is all we have time for on this week's episode of Sideline Story. Thank you so much for joining us. And of course, we will be back next week with our latest topic, and we'll see you then.
This is CGTN Radio. Hear the difference.